I am one who prefers to see this country governed from the center. Many of the policy positions from the far right and far left do absolutely nothing for me. This Afghanistan issue at times is one issue that has united folks in their criticism of the commander-in-chief, of the military at the intelligence level, not the military on the ground, but on what information has been provided. One of the most prominent groups in the center, in fact, the most prominent in Congress, is the Problem Solvers Caucus. Dean Phillips is on this show often. He is the 3rd District Congressman from this state. And we've had a chance before to talk to Dean and Congressman Dusty Johnson, who is the at-large congressman from South Dakota, and they both join us. Dusty and Dean, thank you so much. Dean, I will start with you. I know you guys have been making the tour a little bit here in town. Tell us about what has been taking place with you and Dusty the last couple days, then we'll jump right in on Afghanistan.
Well, Chad, great to be back with you. And frankly, Dusty and I are doing what we want to see all of America do, which is to celebrate our differences of opinion and perspective and get to know each other. Dusty has become a dear friend, a valued colleague, someone from whom I learn and have thoughtful debate and deliberation, and doing the work that I think our founders intended. And it starts with getting to know each other. And in a country that feels so divided, much of it predicated on the angertainment industry that thrives on separating us and stoking fear, Dusty and I are trying to show our country and this community that we can do better. And by simply breaking bread, getting to know each other, trusting each other, learning from each other, we can do exactly what you just referred to, which is govern this remarkable country in a way that honors our traditions, prepares ourselves for the future, and creates a more optimistic and hopeful future for our kids. And that's what we're trying to do.
Dusty, pleasure to have you on again. I want to jump in Afghanistan because it's such an important issue and is dominating the headlines for all the valid reasons. What part of this story angers you most?
Oh, I think probably the fact that, probably that angers me the most is the fact that I think we still have an administration that's not really taking ownership. Listen, I get it. There are lots and lots of people that could be blamed for this, but ultimately I think what America wants is for the commander-in-chief to step up and say, listen, reasonable people can agree or disagree about the decision to withdraw, but we all need to acknowledge the withdrawal. The execution of it has not gone as any of us would have wanted. And I'm saddened most by the fact that we had almost 200 people die yesterday, and that we could have something like that happen today or tomorrow, and that the situation is still not stable. And we have got a lot of work to do, and there is a role for Democrats or Republicans, as you alluded to come together to try to make sure we get this right.
Dusty, what should have happened?
Well, what should have happened is and again, this is with the benefit of hindsight, right? But we should have obviously started these withdrawal efforts much, much earlier. There was no way this was going to get done by August 31st, the date that the president had set. Now, clearly, the Afghan National Security Forces did not hold like we expected them to hold, like the intelligence community and the Department of Defense told us they would hold. But we should have not prepared for the median outcome. We should have really prepared for almost the worst case. And that would have meant getting these interpreters, getting these diplomatic corps staffers, getting these other international partners out, not yesterday, not last week, but a month or 2 or 3 ago. I'm glad we can all come together to celebrate 100,000 evacuations in the last few days, but I don't know why this has had to be such a terrible and deadly fire drill. It did not have to be this way.
All right, Dean, I want to stay with that. From what you have learned from your work as a congressman like Dusty, is there any justification from the White House for waiting as long as they did?
Well, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, Chad, but the truth is I don't think so. I think Dusty spoke very similarly to how I feel about this whole circumstance. I will say, though, I am more focused right now, as is Dusty and many of our colleagues, at doing our very best to advocate for those who remain in Afghanistan, who are seeking refuge, both American citizens and our allies and friends. We will have time to litigate this. It's our responsibility in Congress to provide that accountability and oversight, and most importantly, assess what went wrong and ensure that should we be in this position again, which I hope we're not, that we do better. But to your question, Chad, should we have been more planful, more mindful of this potential outcome and be planning ahead with more intention? Absolutely. It is a failure of strategy, of execution, and I think also a metaphor for what is so often wrong in Washington. It embodies that lack of trust, a lack of communication, and building relationships. We have multiple agencies with great competencies. I think too often they do not share information. They work in silos. We got to tear down those walls and start doing a better job of communicating on behalf of our country's broader interests.
Two members of the Problem Solvers Caucus with us, a group that is getting bigger and bigger within Congress itself. Congressman Dusty Johnson from South Dakota and Congressman Dean Phillips representing the 3rd District of Minnesota. Dean, I want to push back a little bit in this sense. We just had on before the break Colonel David Hunt, who served our country for almost 30 years and is still very well connected within the military and has been a great asset to me for 20 years. And he has offered up that he believes that the intelligence was telling Joe Biden that he needed to do this sooner and that he could not rely on this Afghani army to stay together, that they were getting so much money from the Taliban that the collapse was going to happen quickly. Do you think we're going to have the apparatus to find out directly what the president knew, when he knew it, to hold him and the administration directly responsible for this decision, to potentially point out that they were given false information or that they were given accurate information and didn't follow it in the way that most people would expect them to do?
Chad, I want to provide a little bipartisan kudos.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure you have noticed, as I have, how many Democratic members are filled with righteous indignation and frustration, and they are not trying to sweep this under the rug. And all too often in American politics, we're all about the home team. And, certainly not every member of Congress is handling this responsibly. But you ask, will we be able to get to the bottom of this over time? And I would tell you right now, I am seeing a very real and authentic interest on both sides of the aisle to do that. And presuming that time does not dull that passion, I think it would not surprise me one bit, Chad, if we find out that the truth is exactly as you have described, that perhaps the intelligence community was not as optimistic as the White House, that this could be done on this timeline.
And Chad, and to your question, I hold in the highest esteem our intelligence agents, our diplomatic corps, and our military. I think each are world class. But there has been a failure in leadership, and it is our job in Congress to ascertain what happened. I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Rest assured, we will be holding hearings shortly to get to the bottom of it and hold those to account who must be. And in that respect, I do concur. There is something called the dissent channel at the Department of State, so that diplomats who wish to share information that may not be what the administration wants to hear or what may be unpopular can do so. I don't want to prognosticate, but I do believe we will see evidence that diplomats and intelligence have been warning about this for some time. But it's the lack of coordination, the lack of a well-conceived strategy anticipating this horrible outcome. And by the way, that horrible outcome was the fall of an Afghan army in which we had invested almost 2 decades, tens of billions of dollars, and clearly could not read the very obvious tea leaves that they would fall so quickly and in such shambles so soon. So we will get to the bottom of it, and that, by the way, is nonpartisan. That it should be the job of everyone in Congress to do so authentically, expeditiously, and honorably, and that's what we'll do.
I want to get to one other topic, but Dusty, we did get a text on this, so I want to follow up. You've had a certain number of Republicans who are so outraged by what has taken place and so critical of what has taken place that they've started to talk of potential impeachment of Joe Biden. To you, does that make sense at this point knowing what you know?
It's certainly not a political reality. I mean, keep in mind the Constitution calls impeachment an extraordinary measure that's to be used for high crimes and misdemeanors. Presidents make mistakes, sometimes terrible mistakes, sometimes inexplicably terrible mistakes. The Constitution does not call for those kinds of policy errors or execution errors to be impeachable by and large. And I think more to the point of the political reality, listen, the Democrats control the House and the Senate, right? I mean, the impeachment is not going to happen. Removal is not going to happen. And if it did, I guess I'm surprised that so many of my colleagues on the right are so fascinated by the concept of a Kamala Harris presidency. I mean, and I think, honestly, this is a strategic misstep. If the only thing we cared about was politics, and I don't care about politics a ton, but if the only thing we cared about was politics, I think the Republicans are making a terrible mistake here. Right now, the headlines are on the error of this White House and of the terrible ramifications that we are seeing in Afghanistan. When we have members of Congress filing articles of impeachment, they make themselves the headlines. And then we get into a more partisan debate where we fall along tribal lines of defending our president or trying to take him out. Can we just for a little while actually try to fix the problem before we move to the political topic at hand?
Well stated. Last question for both of you. And Dean, I'll start with you on infrastructure. Are you going to have a chance when all the final votes happen, not the procedural votes, when the final votes happen in the House, to vote separately on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill and the $3.5 infrastructure bill? And Dean, at this point, are you willing to vote in favor of the $3.5 billion infrastructure bill? And then, Dusty, you chime in also.
Chad, starting with the former, the $1 trillion physical hard infrastructure bill, it's something that Dusty and I and many of our colleagues worked on a bipartisan basis, the same way we did on COVID relief. It is a great expression of what can happen when Democrats and Republicans work together in the best interest of the country. As for the reconciliation package, we're talking about a massive number, $3.5 trillion. I don't know a single member of Congress who could articulate to any of us or you, Chad, exactly what's in it, exactly how it's going to be paid for, and exactly what the impact of those investments will be. Until I have the chance to assess the contents, understand how we will pay for it, and understand the proposed return on those investments, I won't commit to anything. But did I vote to open that debate and deliberation? I did. I do think those investments are important in kids, in families, in green energy, and if we want to remain competitive with our adversaries and allies economically around the world, I think we should be considering those investments, and I surely look forward to participating in that debate.
Dusty?
From my perspective, I would say this. I mean, the 1.2 plus the 3.5, that's larger. Those packages together are larger than the gross domestic product of every country on the planet except China and the United States. It is, as Dean said, a breathtakingly large amount of money. And I think that there are lots of Republicans who are predisposed to like a bipartisan hard infrastructure package. But as long as the $3.5 trillion is hanging around as a villain, it is going to be almost impossible to get a sizable number of Republican votes, because I just think there is a very legitimate and real concern that we are changing the role of government in a way that is not sustainable long term.
And Chad, if I could add one more element to this conversation. Before our vote last week, I had a long conversation with the Speaker, 2 conversations over the weekend, to express to her before my vote how important it is that we remember the small businesses that continue to suffer because of the lack of access to capital that we provided in Congress. Restaurants, live events industry, gyms, the ones that rely on public gatherings to succeed, many of whom were shut out of the programs not because they didn't qualify, but because we didn't allocate enough resources. And I have the assurances from the Speaker that we will now work on a package to support those enterprises, and that is as important, I think, as anything that we're discussing right now as we hope to get everybody through COVID and prepared for a prosperous future.
And one more frustration I've got, Chad, with the big package, and Dean's right, there are some industries that were uniquely impacted by COVID. But when you look at the general economy, The recession ended in April of 2020. Not last April, the April before that. And I think there's still some frustration on behalf of Republicans that we appear to still be spending as though we're in the Great Depression. Some of this target spending almost certainly will provide our country a solid ROI. The rest of it is pretty hard to defend in my mind.
Gentlemen, I appreciate the conversation. We'll reach out again, and thanks again for coming on.
Chad, right back at you, and to everybody. As I always say, keep the faith, and there's a lot more good going on in Congress than anybody might imagine, and Dusty and I are out to demonstrate that.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. That's how I want to see this country governed. Just a fact. I mean, we do interviews here. We give opinions. No doubt, anybody's listening to me the last couple of weeks who thinks I've tiptoed around Joe Biden. Give me a break. Absolutely. Was I critical of Donald Trump? For sure. I don't think he was qualified. Not for a second. By the way, that election, as I've said 100 times, I voted for a Republican. Okay? Why? And I don't accept for 1/10 of a second that, oh, by the way, gosh, if you're a moderate or you're a centrist, you really don't have convictions. Give me a break. The idea that you're further to the right or further to the left, that you're more resolute in your views, no, you're not so tribal. You're not so locked in. You're willing to look at issues. You're willing to, oh, heaven, forgive me, work with somebody. Our country, in my view, would be infinity better if we were represented more by individuals like Johnson and Phillips, who reflect more of this country than extremists, and including all the texts we get. And by the way, keep listening. Thank you so much. But all the texts who don't even listen to what a guest says or what we say, and just assume, hey, I'm a liberal, so it's got to be this. I'm a conservative, so it has to be this. As opposed to actually an exchange of ideas, a conversation, understanding the issue, listening to somebody, and be willing to be open-minded. What do you think?